If you have ever thought to yourself, I know I'm making money, but where the heck did it all go? Then today's interview is definitely for you. My guest is Amber Duggar, who is a cash flow expert for online entrepreneurs. She's also the founder of a company called Profit for Keeps, which is a system developed to help entrepreneurs end the stress and anxiety around numbers. Her holistic system combines personal finance and business cash flow strategies, and it uses the philosophy from one of my personal favorite business books, which is called Profit First. She has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs implement this system and has helped thousands more calculate their revenue goals that actually make sense. Her mission is to help you go from just making money to actually keeping it, which I'm sure is something you are just as interested in as I am. We originally recorded an extended version of this interview for our membership community, which you will hear me mention in this episode. However, that community is not currently open for membership. In fact, it is being redesigned into something brand new that you will be hearing about more in the coming months. So stay tuned for that and enjoy today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have a super special treat. This is someone who you guys have heard me talk before, how I'm very good at meeting friends on the internet and just making them be my friend, basically. And we're getting there. So Amber and I actually connected when I heard her on another podcast. Shout out to Amy Porterfield. I love her podcast. And I heard this woman talk about one of my favorite books, which we're going to get into this in a moment. But after that, went down the rabbit hole of joining her Facebook community, really digging into what a light she is and how much she exists to help entrepreneurs just like you and me, not only make more money in our businesses, but keep it. So I knew I had to share her with all of you, and today we get to do that. So Amber, thanks for being here.
Oh, Lindsay, thanks so much for having me. It's just such an honor.
I'm sure you didn't know that we were going to become friends after this, but that's just kind of how this works.
I love that. I can't
we're live
wait.
on air, so you kind of can't say no. It's just, that's how I roll.
I love it.
Oh my goodness. So before we dive in, because we have some gold for everyone today, and we're actually going to I've done this once before. We're recording the first part of this for our podcast listeners and for the wider community, but we're going to dig deep and we're going to really do some practical hands-on work around setting revenue goals and all the things that you and I could probably nerd out on for hours. We're going to record an extended interview for our membership community, so stay tuned for all of that. But before we do that, I would actually just love to give our listeners a chance to get to know you as a human being, because you are one of us. You are out there and you're taking the next action on your big idea. That's kind of how we phrase this. We're here to help women get out of their own way and into action around their next big idea. And at some point, this for you, your business, your online course, Profit for Keeps, that was just a big idea. And I want to hear the story of how did you turn that idea into what it is today?
Well, thanks, Lindsay. It is honestly an interesting thing. I never thought I would go into business doing this. I was in corporate finance and I never thought I would touch it again with a 10-foot pole. I was really tired of the industry and I felt like my soul was dying a little bit every day in my cubicle. And so after a really bad bicycle accident, which was honestly the biggest blessing, it gave me some time to just reflect on what it is that I truly wanted. And I came across a podcast that was talking all about health coaching. And I love to just deep dive in figuring out different ways to just feel vibrant and full of energy. And so I decided to take the plunge and become a health coach. So for the next year, I went through a certification for health coaching and left my job right when I finished the certification and moved to Bali. And it was a total change. I was living in Bali and seeing my clients, and I was in this thing called Tribe Wanted. And in that were all these different entrepreneurs that were doing startups of some kind. And the idea was that we would spend 50% of our time working on our own business. And then we would spend 25% of the time helping others, and the last bit of our time exploring the island together. And it was just an incredible experience. There were so many amazing people and change makers and creative people that were doing all sorts of amazing things. And one thing that I felt like I didn't really contribute too much was I was a health coach, and everyone that goes to Bali pretty much is into health. And so they were all asking me about money, and they were asking about, like, what's the system you're using? Because you don't seem that stressed about money, and you seem to know like what you're doing with it. And I said, well, yeah, I'd be happy to help in that area. No problem. So I was showing them my system that I had used to feel comfortable leaving corporate. Because for me, I have a Myers-Briggs personality that's least likely to go into business for herself.
Okay.
So I had a very high level of fear when I left my job, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, what if I don't make enough money? What if I can't pay my bills? And so I set up a system to allow myself to feel sort of comfortable, but not very comfortable. Like, it was just a constant battle for myself. And so I was looking into, or I was doing Skillshares for them. And people were just asking more about it. And so I started doing interviews with people, and they were saying, there's just something different about the way you're describing this. And it was really interesting because I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is so different, because I view finance as like a gray suit in a sterile office. And that's how everyone approaches it. And going through health coach certification, there was this beautiful holistic approach to health that I saw being very hand in being able to approach finance, and looking at it from a point of money is just a resource. Money is just something that we use to be able to go live in Bali, or be able to travel the world, or go and refinish our basement, whatever it is. There's something that we're wanting to experience or do, and it happens to take resources to do it. So that's how it kind of started, was when I was in Bali and being asked about it a lot. And about a year later, I decided to fully transition over into being a money coach versus a health coach, but with a holistic approach, and marrying both wealth consciousness and practical tools in a way that is quite different. So it's not bookkeeping, it's not accounting, it's truly looking at your cash and your cash flow and setting purpose and intention to that. And it's just been an amazing ride since then. I just really love what I do. I love seeing the impact that it's creating. And my biggest goal, honestly, is to put myself out of business. I don't want this to even have to be a conversation, because everyone is empowered with their own numbers and they know how to do it, because it truly is simple. And right now we're working against an industry that's trying to keep people confused and trying to keep people powerless. And I'm here to change that. So I really do appreciate you having me here today, so that we can continue to create that ripple effect, so that more and more people are empowered with their numbers.
Oh my goodness. I love how you framed that. And I did read that in your bio. That's actually something you and I have in common, is a health background. But I love how I didn't quite make the connection just to the bigger picture, and how what you're doing does absolutely still give people more vibrant health, because you said the magic word, stress. And I think as business owners, we come into this new vision with all of the bright and shiny, feelings, and knowing that we want to change the world. And truthfully, I think very few of us are prepared for what it takes to run a business. A lot of entrepreneurs didn't go to school for business, or even if they did, I did, and I don't know that I learned anything that actually has helped me run my business. So I'm so grateful for people like you who are brave enough to make that pivot and really support so many. You're probably having an even bigger ripple effect in the world of health by empowering health coaches to continue running their business in a way that keeps the business healthy, therefore allows them to continue making the difference that they make. So I don't know if you realize what a big deal you are, but it's so beautiful to see how that transition happened.
Thank you, Lindsay. It really means a lot. I appreciate that.
So let's get into this, because one of the reason I initially listened to that interview you were on is because it mentioned in the title a book I had just read and literally devoured. It was one of those books in my business that was an eye opener. It was a completely different way of thinking about money and revenue and cash flow. And that book is called Profit First. We've actually talked about it on the podcast before, and I will link it in the show notes so everyone can find it and grab a copy. Was finding that book your wake-up call? Where did that come into your journey? And then let's dig into what the philosophy behind it really is.
Sure. Yes, it's such a game changer of a book. And I love it because it's written by someone who is not an accountant or a bookkeeper. So it's really looking at it from the most practical standpoint. So yes, this book came into my life at 2 a.m. I was running a budget course for health coaches that were in a former mastermind of mine, and they wanted to implement this system that I had come up with that I was using. And I was really happy with the personal side because my system looks at both personal and business, because our business is our personal life as well, especially when we're doing what we truly desire. So I had it down for personal. For business, I had a system. I was putting aside money for taxes and making sure to list all my expenses, but I didn't feel like it was like the best. I didn't feel amazing about it. I didn't feel like it felt like there was something missing. And so my business coach at the time said, have you heard of this book called Profit First? I hear about it recently, and it's supposed to be really a game changer. And this was before it was republished by Penguin. So this had been self-published by Mike Michalowicz. And I said, sure, I'll definitely take a look. It sounds good. Profit First. How could it not be? And so I started reading it, and I literally finished it at 2 a.m. I could not put it down. I made a Facebook Live the very next day, and I said, ladies, I'm sorry, this is going to be delayed a week. I'm revamping this coursework, but I need to reach out to Profit First and make sure that I can do that, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't, going against any copyright or anything like that. So I reached out to them, and I became one of their first coaches that is a Profit First professional. So I became a Profit First professional right away. And then we put it into the course, and it was amazing. And I just love Profit First. So I can't wait to share with your listeners what it is.
It was such a game changer. And what I love is that you've taken a concept that in the book really dives deep into how someone would implement this in a huge business. I mean, with hundreds of employees, millions of dollars in revenue. And truly for our audience, most are not at that point and maybe never want to get there. So I love that you really simplified it for the virtual entrepreneur or the startup entrepreneur, because this is a system I wish I would have had from day one. So those of you who are just getting started, or you're thinking, I don't really need a cash flow management system, I just need some cash. Trust me, you want to have this mentality going into making your very first dollar, because it's going to eliminate so much stress for you. So will you walk us through the philosophy behind Profit First, and then we'll dig into all of the goodness that it really does provide?
Sure. Okay. So I love that you mentioned that the book does explain it a bit differently. So when I read the book, I knew right away that I wanted to do things differently, because for anyone that's going into business for themselves, that's an online business, service-based business, we're not going to have 3 months or 3 years of financial statements. We're not going to have all these different things that it asks you to gather. So Profit First is very simple. When you think about it, money comes into your business. Any business is going to have money that comes into the business. And profit is defined by sales, or the money that comes in, minus any expenses. Whatever's left over is profit. And so this book describes it in a very slightly different way, but it's pivotal. Instead, it's sales, or the money that comes into your business, minus profit. So you intentionally take out a certain amount and put it to the side, and the rest of it is available for expenses. And so just like in a personal life, as a kids, like if we put a certain amount in our piggy bank and we didn't touch it, and we had the rest to go spend it on whatever we wanted, we got to keep that cash in the piggy bank. And this is the same concept. We're just making sure that we don't spend every single penny that's in the bank account, so that we can really start to build some wealth in the business and build some savings in the business. And it completely changes everything for a business because they're no longer thinking about when is the money going to come in because I need to pay these bills. Instead, there's a little bit more of a cushion. So to take this a little bit further, what Profit First really does is allows you to organize your cash as it comes in. So the simple thing is, yes, take out profit. But then sometimes, we'll think about like, how are we going to pay ourselves? How are we going to make sure we have enough money for taxes? How do we make sure that we have enough money for the expenses, even if my sales are variable, and meaning high one month, low one month, I launch and then I don't get in any money for the next 2 months. How do I handle that? So think about all the money that comes in and it's in a pile, and then you separate that pile into 4 piles. So then you have, okay, a certain amount's going to go to profit, a certain amount's going to go to owner's pay, a certain amount's going to go to taxes, and the rest is available for my business expenses. So every single time money comes in, it's organized into those 4 piles, and then you always know exactly how much money you have available to pay yourself because it's sitting there in a separate pile. You know that the money sitting in taxes you're not touching because that's going to be available for you when you have to pay your taxes. And then the leftover amount for expenses, that's what you have for expenses. So that's the basic principle behind Profit First.
Which is radical because, like you said, I think that the way the human brain often works is to think, well, I just need to bring in enough money to cover my expenses. And then once I start making more, right, that's like the dream we all have, then I'll have money to pay myself and to start, saving toward bigger business investments. And in my experience, that just we never get to the point where we make enough money if we don't have these good habits set in place in the first place to ever feel like we're getting ahead. And when I say we, I just mean me. That was like my journey as a new entrepreneur, especially. And I had the great situation that I didn't have super high expenses. And yet, I don't know if anyone else has ever been in this position. It would feel like money came in and then it was like, where did it go? So having a system to answer that question, where did it go, was so empowering. So if someone is brand new to this, they've never read Profit First, I'm sure they're pausing this to go on Amazon and buy their copy. Where is the first place to start? When someone says, okay, I'm understanding this, I want to implement it, where do I start?
That's a great question, especially for an online entrepreneur. The best way to start is to figure out how much it is that you actually want to be making in your business to cover the things that you want your business to pay for. So this was one of the main reasons that I was looking specifically at this, because when I was a health coach, I was seeing advertisements for make your first 5K month or make your first 10K month. And I was living in Washington, D.C., and I knew for sure for me, I needed to be making 8K. So when I saw the 5K, I thought, well, that's not gonna be enough for me to cover everything that I need to pay for. And I remember specifically being told, oh, well, let's be realistic and try to hit the 5K first. And that was something that's really that one sentence changed it all for me. And I realized so many people hear this. So many people hear, just try to do this first. And some people are going to need $2,000 a month. Some people are going to need $35,000 a month. It doesn't really matter. What matters is the things that are in your life are getting covered, and things that you want to experience, things that you want to do are also getting covered. So it's really more about making sure that your business is making enough money to cover the things you want to pay for and still have enough money for taxes. So the very first thing that I love to ask people is, what is it that you truly want to do with the money that comes into your business? Why did you go into business for yourself? What do you desire? What type of life do you want to live? What do you want to be able to cover? Do you have other income that comes in from other sources? Are you the sole provider? What do you desire? And that is something that I think most people that come to me have not actually asked themselves, because we tend to really think about the immediate, which is, I need to make more money because I have these expenses and I need to pay them. And so when we remove ourselves and because right now I think that it's hard to see anything but that, because that's what we've been taught. But imagine a system where you're making enough money to cover all of that. You don't have any debt. You have savings. That's the place I want everyone to visualize themselves at. What would you do with extra money that comes in? Because a lot of times, we'll think, oh, we're going to pay this down. We're going to put it in savings. I want you to assume you already have all of that. And just think, do you want to go to Paris? Do you want to take an RV trip for a year? Do you want to, take your parents to a beautiful location and treat them for a week? Whatever it is, what are the things you want to do? So make a list of that. And then figure out how much you want to be making, which is a revenue goal calculation, and seeing that number and then looking at your business and saying, what changes, if any, do I need to make to be able to generate that type of revenue? And that would be the first thing I would do.
That's so critical, because I feel like the mentality behind just pay the expenses first has us in almost like a lack mindset. And I know you do a lot around wealth consciousness. We can even see if we can dig into this on the second half of the interview if there's time. If not, you'll just have to come back. But do you find that the profit first model actually gets people into a whole different way of thinking about money?
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember a client telling me once, because it's always a bit of a I don't want to say shock, but sometimes it can really be a little bit jolting to first see that number, because we have it in our mind a certain number. And if we've came from corporate, that number may be the take-home pay that we had, but our take-home pay is always different from the amount of salary that we're actually receiving every month.
Right.
And so a lot of times I see people first, and I definitely did this, first aiming to make the amount of money that we took home from our corporate job, but then recognizing, okay, this is not nearly enough. I still need to pay taxes. I still need to pay my business expenses. So I always suggest taking a deep breath before you do the revenue goal calculation, so that once you get it, you can start to have it be embodied, and you can start to say, okay, this makes sense. This is the amount of money I need to be making. But by having that number, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Could you repeat the question?
I do that all the time. So we're talking a little bit about just the mentality, the different mentality, getting us out of that
right.
That lack viewpoint. So continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the mentality is, what my client told me was, after she did this revenue calculation, she realized, wow, I need to make about twice as much as what I thought I did. So when I look at a tube of toothpaste and I see it's $4, I always remind myself, no, that's really $8 because I want to bring in $8 to be able to pay for that $4, because, she's accounting for taxes and profit and for her business expenses. And I loved that. It was like, oh my gosh, this is such a shift, because now you can look at this as truly what it is that you want to be bringing in, so that you can do that without feeling like, where did all the money go?
I love that so, so much. And I also love the piece about having a realistic revenue goal and having a number to shoot for, versus that mentality of, I'm going to keep my expectation low. When you know the number you're working with, then you have that power. You can actually sit down and write, what are your revenue streams? Okay, then what's your plan to sell enough units, sell enough online courses, book your calendar, or know if maybe something within your business systems needs to change in order to allow you to make more revenue. So I think the awareness, especially for women, I feel like this isn't necessarily always ingrained in us. Even just, thinking about money, like being like the boss of our money. I feel like this is a new conversation our generation is now ready to stand up and take ownership of. But I think about like my parents' generation, my mom isn't the one that does the finances. So this just was really empowering when I had this tool that that I could apply to my business, it's also absolutely helped my personal finances and just given us a lot more freedom there. So we're going to transition now into a deeper dive in the membership community. But for our podcast listeners, I would love if you would share, you keep referencing your free online calculator. It is saved in my Google Drive. I use this every week. It is an incredible tool and it's free 99. And then also talk a little bit about your Facebook community, because that's a place where people can learn so much more for you, because we are just scratching the surface. So will you talk about where people can find those?
Sure, thank you. So the revenue calculator is absolutely something that I encourage all of you to go and download. It's you can find it at amberdugger.com/calculator. And this is a calculator that allows you to reverse engineer profit first. So you can put in how much you want to be making and your business expenses, and you will then see that number for yourself. It will also give you profit first percentages specific to your situation. So I highly recommend that you do that so that you can start seeing what changes you need to make in your business to make that happen, if any. And the community is called Sweet Life Purposeful Money. It's on Facebook, and it's a wonderful place for people to really feel safe to explore everything about money, both personal, business, and really just having a conversation, an open conversation about money. So I would love to see everyone there as well.
It's a party. I'll be there. So I'd love to see you as well. And, I just really appreciate the work that you are doing. And just know if any of this interview is making your brain hurt because you haven't thought about this before, that's the point. The point is to get you thinking differently and realizing that you can absolutely experience freedom around money, experience your business as an entity that gives you life, not that feels as though it brings you death sometimes, because you have to think about things like taxes and profit. This system is really made for the person who doesn't think they're good with money. It truly is. So I encourage everyone to connect with Amber, learn more about her courses. The best place to start is with those free resources, and then you'll have a chance to learn so much more about going deeper with her in her course and all the things that she offers. So thank you so much for being willing to do this tandem interview and give our podcast listeners a taste of what we're going to do a little deeper dive on in our membership community.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.